Another season is in the book for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Where did they fall record-wise in the reverse standings, and who will have the top overall pick in this year's NBA draft? Plus, we're going to dive into and recap this game against the LA Clippers to end the season. Plus, what's ahead in the offseason for the Thunder and for Locked On Thunder. All of that and more on today's show on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your teams every day.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I'm your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. You can follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by BetOnline.net. We're going to officially dive into the pre-play-in Tankathon lottery standings. Where do the Thunder sit right now? What does that mean for the Thunder and their future? Plus, we'll dive into their loss to the Clippers to end the regular season. But again, today's show is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered for all the latest props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Go check them out today at betonline.net. So the season's officially over. That tanking season by the Thunder is done. And mercifully so. At the end of the season, there was a lot of bad basketball. There were a lot of new players shuffled in and out, and there were tanking measures you never thought a team would need to take, like shutting down Tim Aldon and Pokusevski and not even playing Lindy Waters for the last couple of games. But you've made it to another end. And the question is, where did it get you? Well, the Houston Rockets have the best odds at the top overall pick with a 52.1% chance to land in the top four, but a 14% chance to land at the top overall pick. Orlando and Detroit have the same odds as Houston because the top three, of course, all have the same odds in the NBA lottery. And then Oklahoma City falls at 4. They were a game back of third, a game up of 5 of the Pacers. And so here's the Thunder lottery odds. 48.1% chance at the top 4 pick. 12.5% chance at the top overall pick. There it is. There's a 12.5% chance the Thunder get the first overall pick and can get whoever they want in this year's draft, a draft that consists of a, reliable top 3, a consensus top 3, if you will. You really need to get in there. You really need a top 3 pick, and you have a chance at a top 4 pick with a 48.1% chance to be exact at the top 4 pick. We've seen that this can go a bunch of different directions. It's a total lottery system with lottery balls and ping pong balls and results that don't make sense. But to finish out the lottery, we'll dive into the Thunder pick-by-pick chances. After 4th, the Thunder, you go Pacers, Blazers, Kings, Pelicans, and Spurs in the top 9. And then Washington, Portland, via New Orleans, Knicks, Hornets, Hawks, Clippers to Oklahoma City could leap into the lottery as well. Now, Clippers are at 15 right now, but they could leap into the lottery because the lottery odds do not set until after the play-in. So even though the Clippers are at 15, if they lose in the play-in, they lose tomorrow to Minnesota, they lose the subsequent game after that. If they lose those 2 games, they will then be in the lottery. And their pick is completely and totally unprotected to Oklahoma City. So even if that roughly 0.7% chance happens and they get the top overall pick, even if that roughly 3.4% chance of a top 4 pick happens and they get a top 4 pick, now be it, those will be very unlikely. But if they do happen, that pick absolutely goes to Oklahoma City. So you might as well throw your hat in the ring and see if the most unlikely scenario happens and root against the Clippers for these next couple of games and just test your odds. And if nothing else, move up a pick or 2 in the lottery system. So that's what's at stake in general for the Thunder. Now, you can have the odds for the pick-by-pick basis. The most prevalent or the most likely scenario at 25.7% is the Thunder get the 6th overall pick. That's your highest percentage point to get to a single pick slot. 25.7 for pick 6. Your next highest is 16.7 for pick 7 overall. Then you have a 12.5% chance at the top overall pick, a 12.2% chance at the second overall pick, an 11.9% chance at the 3rd overall pick, an 11.5% chance at the 4th overall pick. And then you have a 7.2% chance at the 5th overall pick. And then here's the big one, a 2.2% chance at the 8th overall pick. That's your floor. Again, is that likely to land in the 2.2% chance? No. But knowing the Thunder's luck, it might. So that the lowest you can fall is pick 8. The average kind of position, according to Tinkathon, is 4.4. So hopefully the Thunder at least land in the top 4 and can get one of the best 4 players, which, again, the top 3 is pretty consensus. You have some combination of Chet, Jabari, Smith, and Balabinquero. But the 4th pick is also pretty set in stone of Jaden Ivey in terms of the consensus big boards. Now, if Shaden Sharp declares for the draft and if he blows you away at the combine or pro days or I should say, in-person private workouts, things of that nature, you could totally see Sharp flying off these boards, at least to the top 4, obviously. So a little more uncertainty at 4, clearly, but still, there's a big drop-off, I think, from 3 to 4, but not a quantum leap, not a canyon-sized drop-off from 3 to 4. Let's just go ahead and get a rough big board out there for the top 8 picks. Of course, I have a big board going down through 80, but let's just make sure that we have our top 8 right here for the time being. Then we'll have big board shows and draft shows all throughout the off season. We're not going to go anywhere 5 days a week throughout the off season. So make sure you subscribe for free across all platforms so you never miss an episode. But I have Jabari Smith number 1. I think that he is a clear cut number 1 option on this big board and for the Thunder and for really any team that gets the top overall pick. I have Chet number 2. I don't want whatever you feel about Poku to cloud your judgment or cloud your perspective on Chet. I know that there's some Thunder fans out there who have seen or not liked Pokusevski's development and therefore don't want the Thunder to take Chet, but Chet's a really special player. If you grade him independently of Pokusevski and don't have like the misconceptions about Pokusevski that you do with Chet, I think he's number 2, and Paulo Banchero is number 3. Again, most people have this top 3, and again, there's a ton of different combinations that you can see. You can see people have Paulo at 1, Jabari at 2, Chet at 3, Chet at 1, Paulo at 2, Jabari at 3. It can go any different way you want to, but that's just kind of my rankings in all of this. And the bottom line is, it would be a huge success to land one of these 3 players. And I wouldn't really care which one. If the Thunder get the top overall pick and draft Paulo Banchero, even though he's my 3rd overall player, it wouldn't bug me at all. It'd still be considered a massive win for me. The goal on draft night should be one of these 3 players for the Thunder, and then you move from there throughout the offseason. Number 4, I have Jaden Ivey. Number 5, I have Sharp. I think that this guy can be incredible. I think that if he even played half of a college season, he might be the top overall pick in this year's draft. I think that his high school stuff, I know it's iffy to bet on high school AAU tape and high school AAU highlights, but I think that what you're seeing in high school is firmly translatable to the NBA, as crazy as that sounds. And so it seems like he'd be a pretty Thundery pick as well, as long as he had a good interview process and workout process with the Thunder. But I have him at 5 after I have Jaden Ivey at 4, and then AJ Griffin at 6, Tegan Murray at 7, and Johnny Davis at 8. Just to give you a glimpse of my big board real quick, I think that Johnny Davis at 8 makes slightly more sense than Agbaji at 9, who I have at 9, obviously. I have Agbaji so high because I just can't see a realm in which he fails in the NBA. Obviously, something catastrophic could happen. No one is, this isn't exact science by any means, but I just don't see a way where you just pick Agbaji and he's terrible out of the league in 3 years and just is a waste of a pick. I think he's at least going to bring your team value. And when you're picking at 8, that's very comforting. However, for a team like the Thunder who are trying to get as many swings as they can at a pillar blue chip prospect, blue chip player, maybe that safe route's not the route you want to go in the top 10, but if he's still around at that Clippers pick, then sure, you take Agbaji. So it's all up in the air right now for me, but that's just kind of where my big board's at this very moment. Of course, we still have a long ways to go in terms of the combine and the interview process and things leaking out from the workouts and physicals and measurables and all of that fun stuff. So a long way to go, and that's just a taste of where the big board is at this very moment. But what do you think about the lottery odds? What do you think about this season as a whole? Thunder tank this year and still end up at 4 instead of the illustrious bottom 3 that you want to end up in. How are you feeling about the season we just saw and also the season upcoming and the off season? And What's your big board? If you had to label 1 through 8 to kind of protect yourself on what the lowest possible pick would be for the Thunder, who'd be around pick 8 for you on your big board right now? So I do want to say right now, though, my good friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar is a fantastic protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCK15, get 15% off of your next order. It's that easy. It's that simple. It's that time again for you to stick true to your New Year's resolution. And I want you to make sure that you are doing that with Built Bar. And the reason that it's easy for me to stay true to that resolution because Built Bar has so many flavors that it does not make doing the right thing, like eating a great protein bar that's great for you, repetitive. With their many flavors, I feel reinvigorated every single time I go to the pantry or the refrigerator to get a Built Bar. They have 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Make sure you check them out today at built.com, promo code LOCK15, built.com, promo code LOCK15, 15% off of your next order. We are back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you for making Locked On Thunder your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you, talking Thunder basketball. For your next listen, go check out the Locked On Now podcast, a nightly recap show of every NBA game from the night before with a take from our local experts as well. And that's going to be key in the playoffs because it's free and available anywhere you get your podcast from. And after you watch these incredible playoff games we're about to witness, you can hop on the Locked On Now podcast and get a brief synopsis of the game and what you just saw from an insider point of view, the way that we all are on the Locked On Podcast Network. So make sure you check it out wherever you get podcasts from. We are back on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. And let's talk about this game against the Clippers. We talked all about the draft and the lottery and things that are very important, but in the second segment, let's do our last game recap of the year. Yeah, this was a tough one, right? Teo Maledon's out, Pokusevski's out, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl's out, Lindy Waters is out, Wiggins is out, Giddey is out, SGA, Dort, Baisley, Favors, Jerome, and Trey Mann's out, as well as Mike Muscala and Kenny Hustle. For the Clippers, they sat down Jay Scrubb, sat down Reggie Jackson, Kawhi, Paul George, Jason Preston, and Marcus Morris. The Clippers start Terrence Mann, Luke Kennard, Robert Covington, and Coffey with Zubac as well. And then the Thunder start Xavier Simpson, Vid Krejci, Isaiah Roby, Jalen Horde, and Georges in this game, and they fall 138-88. The Clippers built a 50-point lead in this one. The Thunder never led in this game. One time the game was tied, and it was just a complete masterpiece from the Clippers, even though they didn't have much to play for. They out-rebound the Thunder 57-40. They have one more turnover than OKC, but they dominate fast break points 23-9. They also dominate the second chance points as well, and they tied in points in the paint, and they dominate bench points 52-8. The Thunder win points off turnovers, though, 15-8, and neither team had much to play for because the Pistons beat the Sixers to eliminate the shot of jumping up to 3 for the Thunder, and the Clippers had their plans fate sealed with the tournament against Minnesota on Tuesday. So, again, root for the T-Wolves because you need the Clippers to be bounced. Just have a sliver of hope of jumping up in the lottery in any which way. It'd be funny, though, like it's just another thing to add to the bad luck what-if scenarios for the Thunder over the years. If the Clippers do advance in the play-in, go to the NBA first round, and then the person taking their spot in the lottery somehow makes that 0.2% leap into the top pick, that'd just be just the Thunder's luck, right? You can just add that to the long list of what-if scenarios, and of course that would happen to Oklahoma City. But the Thunder have 5 in double figures, and they had 6 players playing total. The Clippers had 7 double figures and 1 with 9. Yes, the Thunder did play 6 players in this one. 6. It was one of those games. Hey, on the bright side, Georges goes out with a bang, 14 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, 6 rebounds, 3 for 6 from 3, 40% from the floor in 48 minutes. Jalen Horde, although inefficient, had a double-double again, 1 for 6 from 3, 30% from the floor, 15 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, a block, a turnover, and 14 points within 45 minutes. Jalen Horde played well last year on his 2-way contract. He's played well this year on his 10-day deal. But ultimately, I don't foresee him having a sustainable NBA future. And again, if you believe that the Thunder are going to invest in Lindy Waters, as they've shown with his 2-year 2-way deal, you're not going to occupy the only 2-way spot you have available left after giving Lindy Waters that deal going into next year on Jalen Horde. It's just not the case. He's a guy you bring in around this time of year. He's not a guy that you use a true NBA spot on, in my opinion, or you tie up another 2-way spot on a 23-year-old guy who's bounced around the league already from Portland to Oklahoma City and has done this very thing last year. And that still did not give him enough credence to hop aboard the Thunder roster for the long haul this year. I don't see how this will be any different. I think that he'll be in the G League next year. He'll be an awesome player in the G League, and he'll be ready for the call from the Thunder or for any other team next year whenever they get in the same injury/tanking scenario. And then he'll continue to tread water that way and to get his NBA minutes and playing time and experience that way. I just don't think that this will lead to a bigger deal. I don't think this will lead to a big contract or a roster spot fully or even a two-way deal, because with only having one available, you have to think of how many potential players are going to be coming into the fold after the draft. Not only undrafted players, but also players like Paul Watson Jr., who I wouldn't have signed. I would have kept Josh Hall, although if you look at what's happened with those two players, it wouldn't have really mattered. But I would have kept Josh Hall for the upside play. But the Thunder took a shot on the 26-year-old wing and Paul Watson Jr. Those kind of Paul Watson Jr. types are going to get cut again and going to be available again, just as he was from Toronto this last offseason. Plus, there's going to be guys that you like in the draft that are just going to simply go undrafted. And it depends on how you read the scenario from the NBA draft perspective. You've seen guys like Jordan Hall be heavily tied to the Thunder, and he's once again entered the NBA draft. He's one of the best passers in the draft, and I have him as a top 60 player. I have him as somebody who's going to be drafted in the upper second round. But I talked to other people who scout the NBA and who dabble in the NBA draft, and they have him at times undraftable. So that's another guy who the Thunder have had their eye on in Jordan Hall for 2 years now, and really like him for 2 years now. If he goes undrafted, you're probably going to take the shot on him, a 20-year-old who has an elite trait, versus Jalen Horde, who is a nice rebounder whenever nobody's chasing them and whenever you're tanking and having a high usage rate. But in the flow of a normal NBA game, what would he end up actually being? Probably not that impactful, right? And so you just rather take the shot on the unknown quantity in Jordan Hall or in any of the other players that are available after the draft in that hypothetical scenario. So it's nice, right? You can't take away his 5 3-point game. You can't take away the fact that he had those 20 rebound games and he's the 7th or 8th player, whatever it was, to get a 20-20 game for the Thunder. Like, you can't take any of that away, and that's awesome for his legacy, for his life, for his anything you want to say on the personal side of things. But from a business side of things, I just don't want the freak out to happen whenever the Thunder do eventually part ways with Jalen Horde, as it happened with Olivier Sarr, which was shocking to me. There was YouTube comments, there was DMs, there was mentions, there was everyone panicking or freaking out about Olivier Sarr whenever he was waived. It just never made any sense to me. So I'm just going to caution it again now with Jalen Horde to realize these games meant absolutely nothing other than, did they lose? Did they move up the standings in the reverse standings? That's all they meant. Whatever a player did or didn't do doesn't really matter for these last few games. And now that ride is over, the Thunder will start creating roster spots for the offseason and, of course, utilizing that two-way deal. So we'll see where the Thunder go from here. Same thing with Melvin Frazier. Of course, he didn't really have those huge standout games like Jalen Horde did, but even though he is technically on a two-way deal, I would expect him to be on that deal come, say, June, right? Whenever you can start to maneuver your offseason and start to bring in new players, or July or anything else of that nature. So that's where the Thunder sit right now. Let's talk more about this game like Xavier Simpson and what's to come for the Thunder in the Locked On Thunder podcast as well on the other side of the break. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all betting stats and sports info, for all the latest sports information developments, league news, podcasts, playoff previews, Major League season, all that fun stuff. You can go to BetOnline because they're continuing to be your source for all your information, from the playoffs to esports and more. So go to the website right now, betonline.net. BetOnline is where the game starts. It's this easy, folks. You go to your URL bar and you type in betonline.net. Loads up. You click Sportsbook. And you know what? Let's make a bet on basketball, the NBA. And tomorrow's play-in tournament, the Cavs are 8.5-point underdogs, and the Clippers are 3.5-point underdogs. And then in the Eastern Conference side of things, or I should say on the Wednesday side of things, the Hornets are 4.5-point underdogs, and the Spurs are 5.5-point dogs. I'm going to bet on the Spurs to keep it closer than 5, and I'll bet on them and the Hawks minus 4.5. I just don't see how you beat Trae Young in a one-game playoff scenario, but that should be a lot of fun, the Hornets and the Hawks getting together. And then I'll bet on the Clippers plus 3.5, and I'll bet on Brooklyn minus 8.5. But that one is iffy for me. I probably will change that bet to Cleveland as it gets closer to tip off. But you can go see how you would fare at betonline.net, where the game starts. We are back on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, Rylan Stiles. You can follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles, and make sure you're checking out the Locked On NBA podcast. Make it your second listen after you make us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. It is time for you to flip the jump ball in the play-in tournament and hear from our experts all the way through the finals. Locked On experts take you there in 30 minutes or less, covering all 30 teams on the Locked On NBA podcast. It's free and available across all platforms, just as we are. So make sure you check out Locked On NBA, Locked On Thunder, and everything else associated with Locked On, because we are the largest podcast network in the country. So make sure you check us out anywhere you get podcasts from. Now let's continue diving into this game real quick and talk about Xavier Simpson, who had a nice game for the Thunder in this one. And he plays in 45 minutes, 17 points, 7 rebounds, or I should say 7 assists, 9 rebounds, a steal, a block, 2 turnovers, 3 fouls. He had that nice hook shot that's laughable. Not laughable in the sense of it's bad, but it's just funny seeing a 6-foot guy just get off that hook shot in the paint. But 1 for 3 from three-point land, 46 from the floor. Look, again, was it fun watching Xavier Simpson? He had the fun factor. It was one of the only bright spots in these last couple of games, was watching what would Simpson do next. But he's 25 years old and he's 6 foot tall. Like, he's not going to be somebody the Thunder depend on for the long stretch or for the next season or any of that. He's going to be a really nice player for the Blue if he chooses to go that route. And that about does it for Xavier Simpson and the Thunder in general. But it's awesome for him to actually get that NBA start, or now these couple of NBA starts, and get his NBA games for a reward for his G League performances for the Thunder organization. I hope he's back on the training camp roster. I hope he's back in the preseason, then kind of shuffles back down to the Blue after that's all over. But that's where the Thunder roster sits. My Moneyball pick of the year for the final game of the year was Jalen Horde. It was actually, of course, Georges, who had 3. My MVP of the game, Xavier Simpson. And up next on Locked On Thunder. So tomorrow, on Tuesday, we're going to have a Stock Watch episode with a playoff preview. On Wednesday, we're going to have an exit interview recap. On Thursday, we're going to have our award picks and grading the season as a whole. And then on Friday, our draft profile on Jabari Smith. So a lot of fun there as we wrap up another week of Locked On Thunder. We are staying daily throughout the offseason, so make sure you subscribe for free across all platforms so you never miss a podcast. And also, just to thank you, we've made it through another season together on Locked On Thunder. I know that the longtime listeners of the podcast and journal have seen a ton of hosts, from the great Fred Katz all the way up to Brady Trantham and the kind of revolving door. But I'm glad that we provide some stability now, and I cannot wait for yet another year next year with another season next year on Locked On Thunder. You guys are great. This has truly been a lifelong dream. I mean, I knew from a young age, folks, that I was not cut out to play sports at any sort of elite level, much less varsity high school sports even. So I always wanted to be, a Dan Patrick type of person, media personality, and I always loved the media side of sports even more so than the sports themselves. So as a sports media nerd and somebody who's always wanted to do this, the fact that I get to cover the Thunder each and every day, credentialed by the team, and it's just getting so many great opportunities. It's a thank you of a lifetime that all of you support it, because I could not do that without the support, without the listeners and everything else. So thank you all for listening. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from for free, and follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. And until tomorrow, be good to one another.